Hello and welcome to the 13th Hour podcast. This is episode number 529 and I'm your host Joshua Blum. I'm going to be talking about another musical interlude today. After finishing the last track that I did over the past really month, I thought I would work on something that came out at the same I got ideas for at the same time, but just made some mental notes of, and I'm actually using the same program that I used before. A couple of weeks ago, my brother and I recorded a two-part episode with a game that he worked on over the past year called Mappa Mundi. It's out, you can actually buy it, and it's a tabletop role-playing game that is set in a medieval-ish universe that he and his teammates have created. Free Sale Studio is, I believe, the name. Because it's three guys. They and Jeremy tested it out with me in the sort of the preliminary phase, and then this was after launch. And he's adjusted it so that it kind of fits the world of the 13th Hour in a little bit. It's a very flexible game in that it can kind of fit lots of different settings. As a frame of reference, I knew nothing about a lot of this stuff, despite having grown up in the 1980s for a long time until he discovered it. And he tried it out on his own and then with me. And it's a kind of a cool way to tell stories. It's not as intimidating as it might seem. This particular one is very open and sort of free form, so there's not necessarily a ton of statistics and rules and things like that you got to follow. So that part I think can be intimidating and frankly just kind of confusing for a lot of people, myself included. But if you don't have that stuff, the emphasis is really on storytelling, which is a pretty widespread human kind of thing to do. We tell stories in lots of different ways. And so over the past month, I've been working on telling a story through, that's usually what I try to do, but I try to do it quite literally with the sound effects and things like that with the last track that I did. And I'm doing the same thing today, but in a slightly different context. One of the things that came out of the recording that we did is that there's a particular scene where a creature is encountered and you're observing it. And the whole point of the game is not to fight the creatures. Usually that's the point in a lot of these fantasy games and stories and stuff like that. There's a big creature that you encounter. Nobody understands what it is, and it seems threatening, so they want to kill it. In this case, it's actually the opposite. You're kind of approaching it more like a biologist might approach a species that they see and observing, getting out your inner Jane Goodall and just taking notes and observing what is going on, the interactions that happen in the natural world. With the only shooting that might happen is, I guess, shooting a video, but there's nothing like that they have in this particular world, but you can record it and make pictures and stuff like that. So it's a little bit like Pokemon, I guess, but there is no fighting or dueling aspect of it where the Pokemon sort of battle each other. But it's a little bit like, I guess capturing Pokemon, I guess, from what I understand of that anyway. That's another thing my brother got into. I never really got into it very much because it was kind of, I was already a lot older at that point by that time that stuff became popular. But I think it's sort of the same idea. To go back to what we were talking about before, there's this giant creature that your character encounters. Now, I created a character from the 13th Hour, or in the 13th Hour universe, but the part of the world is kind of like an equivalent of maybe like Siberia or something like that. It's a cool part of the world. There's a whole lore in the book that they when you buy the game, there's a book that comes with it that has how to play it, as well as the lore of the region, the multiple different regions that there are. And this one is set in a sort of frozen tundra area. And, I guess they kind of use sort of like the Mongolian steppes or like Siberia as kind of a basis for a comparison. Anyway, a lot of it happens in the snow and ice, and there's this ice creature that your character encounters, and it's a bunch of animals are following it. So what I wanted to do is create a track that kind of encapsulates a little bit of this. What I imagine, I actually drew a picture of it, a pixel art kind of picture, which I have to finish up, but it shows this, what it looks like. And I wanted to make some music that accompanies the picture. If I can, what I'd like to do is animate the picture so it shows the creature walking, and with the background moving a little bit, then the animals kind of following it. So it's kind of like the animals are following this creature, this big ice creature that is walking. and you're observing the whole thing. That's really the whole thing that happens there. The track, I didn't want it to be necessarily ominous. I wanted it to be a little bit eerie, and I wanted it to show a little bit of sense of awe and wonder. What we're going to be doing is creating something on the keyboard and then using the program that I discussed the last couple of weeks, Bandlab, uploading those key signatures essentially into the program and then fiddling with them there to try to create something. So we probably won't finish it today. Usually I don't finish these in one sitting. It takes a week or more to do it. But this is what I have so far. I got the idea for this little arpeggiated type of pattern. The whole thing is done in the key of C, so it sounds something like this if I added the left hand. So that's what I have so far. This arpeggiating pattern can actually repeat throughout the entire thing. So what I would like to do is take that and then create a little loop that repeats, and then I can start to build it and add to it. The advantage that I have since learned over the past month with using this particular program is that I don't need to play that throughout the entire thing now. I can actually just create a little segment and then essentially magnify that. Before, if I wanted to create a 2-minute song, I would have to play that particular arpeggio for 2 minutes. Which is okay, and I obviously did that with everything else I did, but you encounter a little bit of inconsistency with timing and stuff like that when you play it that way, and sometimes that leads to some difficulties when you're adding extra layers because your counting wasn't entirely metronomic. Interestingly enough, I noticed in this particular program, and maybe there is the case with other programs too, because it is designed for you to actually input stuff with a MIDI keyboard like this, and not just use the actual, manual inputs with a mouse. There is something called quantizing, which I think what that means is that makes it all basically the same distance apart, the notes, so that it is like sort of on beat essentially. But then there's also a thing called humanizing it, which is like shifts it around a little bit so that it's a little bit off time, which is really interesting that they actually have a system in place for actually to technically sound more quote unquote human, I guess, because there's a little bit of error introduced into it. I think it's really hilarious that they have that in there. We've gotten to a point where we need to do that. But anyway, I think for the most part, the human, it's hard to pick up those little inconsistencies unless they're more obvious. And so I usually listen for that kind of stuff when I am in the mixing process. That said, so I'm going to go ahead and record this into the keyboard, and then we'll come back and see what I have. Okay, so this is what I have so far. So that was one loop, and it's going into the second. Okay, so that's that part right there. What I'm going to do now is, because this is played in the key of C, I want to experiment with something that is also in this program. It's labeled here as transpose. And what that means is that I can take all the keys and transpose them or move them up or down the scale of the. So I can make it from C. I can make it into say like a C sharp or a B. It just has a different sound to it if it's in a different key slightly. And so what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this. So I'm going to select all these things first. So I'm going to make it all really small. We can see it all there. I'm going to select them all. There we go. That sounds really cool. And I'm going to transpose them down to, so instead of C, I'm going to go to B or B flat. I'm going to go to B flat. The last one I wrote was, I think, also in B flat, if I'm not mistaken. So I think I'm going to go down. So that's 1, 2. So 2, each of these is, I think, it says -1. So I'm assuming that's down 1 key. Let's see. Let's see if it does it. Yeah, so what it's going to do, it's going to change it. Now it's, yeah, the first key is now on B flat. So let's actually see what that sounds like. It's a slightly different feel. Okay, I'm just going to keep on going there. So what I would like to do next is then duplicate that so that there is a little bit more depth to it. So I'm going to take the whole thing and I'm going to duplicate that track. So I'm going to actually, for the first one, I'm going to call this one. This one's the lead, and I actually used, I think, the sound effect, which in this program is called heavy lead. That's what I used for that one. And then I'm going to make this one a pad of some kind, which is sort of like the slow synthesizer in the background, I think. And so let's actually pick that right now. So let's see, instead of a heavy lead, let's go, they have a whole section of pads, and they have this one called Atlantis pad. Don't know what that one sounds like. Sounds cool. There's an atmospheric. Oh, that one sounds cool. Or Borealis. That might be cool because I imagine this is in the north. You might be able to see the Aurora Borealis. Chill wave synth. Oh, that sounds, I actually like that one. That one might be even better than Borealis pad. Well, I don't know. Then there's Dream pad. What's that? That one's cool. Cloud fluff. Dreamy bells. Wow. Okay. Let me try this one. Chill wave synth. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for right there. Let's try that one. And so let's actually see what that sounds like just by itself. I don't think that needs to be quite as loud as the other one, but let's just actually see what it sounds solo. Oh yeah, that sounds good. So how does that sound together with the other one? Let's see. That sounds okay. It doesn't sound super different. And there's a little bit of distortion created by the two of them together. Let's try, I'm actually going to try. Sometimes when these things sound different, they sound different when you actually put them into play. So let's actually see. And you can change all this too. Let's go to Borealis pad, whatever that is. So let's see what that sounds like solo first. And there's these effects you can add to it. Okay, let's see. All right, that's not bad. Let's see what that all is like together. That's pretty good right there. Okay, so I'm going to fiddle with that. I'm not going to belabor the point because it's like a lot of fiddling. This has, you know, my synthesizer has quite a bit of these effects too, and so you end up just sort of fiddling around until you find something that actually sounds good together. It's the combination of the two kind of sounds better. And you know, with the one I did the past month, I ended up fiddling around with a lot of different sounds until I found something that actually was what I was looking for. So I'm going to fiddle with that. What I would like to do is, now that I have this loop that is built there, I would like to actually kind of create a longer thing. So let's see how long it is right here. It looks like about 15 seconds there. Yeah, okay, so 15 seconds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically duplicate it for quite a bit until I can get to the length of a track. I'd probably make it like a minute or two, something like that. It doesn't have to be super long. But let's actually, now that I have these loops made, I can actually make it a little longer very easily. Okay, so I've got about a minute worth of stuff there, and I'll do the same thing for this other track. Probably should have done all this together. You can duplicate them as a whole. It's very easy to copy paste. There's probably another way to do this. But okay, so now I have all that. I have these two tracks essentially in stereo now. What I'm going to do after I save it is I'm going to add something. I think what it needs is a beat. And so I'm going to add another thing here. I can also add some sound effects, but I don't necessarily want to do that just yet. I think I'm going to add let's add another track. So you can add a track. Let's add the drum part. And let's see, what would be, they ask you some beat stars, select pre-made patterns to kick off your beat, tempo. We're just going to do it from scratch. They have these other things like, interesting. Breakbeat is 130 beats per minute. This is interesting. Classic house, basic 120. A lot of synthwave is typically like 100 to 120-ish, I think, most of the time. Oh, this is adding a drum machine. I don't know. I don't actually want to do necessarily a drum machine. I just want to do just basic drums. Yeah, so I'm going to do the virtual instruments, and we're going to do drums. So the drum pad. The drums are kind of cool because you over here, they have these things called drum pads, and you basically just pick what it is. 8-bit chiptune, for example. Like I'm going to just pick that one just to start with, and then you use the keyboard. The actual, not the piano keyboard, but the actual keyboard itself of the computer to actually hammer out the beat. Let me play around for a second. Okay, here's what I have so far. I don't know if I really like this, but it is not bad, and it's not quite the thing I have in my head, but let's see. Okay, so there's that part. What I'd like to do is something a little faster, I think, but and this is actually where I actually kind of like doing it on the synthesizer a little bit better, because when I would make one of these tracks, I would kind of incorporate the beat right into it and then play along with it. Trying to do it piecemeal this way, I think is, in one hand, it's more flexible because I can add to it and correct things easier. But on the other hand, it's very hard to recreate the beat when you're doing it in just little chunks. Maybe what I'll do is do it kind of the way I used to do it before, which is to have the whole length of the track and then actually just manually hit the drum on the beat for the whole thing. I don't know, instead of creating these little loops, because it's very hard once you finish it. It's very hard to then kind of get the same beat going forward, like without adjusting it each time, and to pick up exactly where it's supposed to be. I can do it a lot better by ear. So I don't know. I think that's where I'm going to leave off for today, because I'm not really sure where to go after this. I know I have to fiddle with it a little bit more to come up with it, but I will show you the picture that I've created so far. And I will also include a link to, I haven't really published it yet, but the track that I submitted for that contest, the one I was working for the past month on, because I actually think the final thing is actually pretty much what I was looking for. And what I think I will probably do is I might actually start to put some of these podcast episodes on YouTube if there's some, because I've done that a little bit before. But with this one, I think it might be cool to put all four of those together as kind of like a compilation, and then maybe accompany it with some, because I would like to make a video along with that, with the hunter chasing the deer and everything like that. I would think that would be kind of fun to do with the like pixel art to do that, if I could make a looping kind of animation to do that. One other thing I could do, actually, and I was using this to make some pixel art, just like a kind of a demo to save the idea, is the games making program I've been using to make the Rocketeer game called GDevelop 5. That one, you can make a very small game there. And I think I'm trying to think like if you could make a game with this, because the whole idea would be maybe you play as the hunter, you control him, and he kind of jumps around, and he has the ability to soar, and it might be kind of cool to see him kind of soaring through the air. I'm not really sure what the point would be, though, because the whole point in the story is that he shoots this deer, but it doesn't really do anything. He has to do the same thing over and over again. So maybe the game would be like, how many times can you actually shoot the deer or something, or chase after the deer, or find the deer, or something to that effect. That's kind of a bigger project because I would have to make the backgrounds and the animations and all that kind of stuff. So that's sort of a big thing, but I could put the track in the background. Anyway, future projects. This one, though, I'm tentatively calling the Ice Giant, and you will see the stuff in the show notes about what it looks like so far. So I'll probably be back next week with either an update to this, or I'll actually put the 2-part episode that I recorded with my brother all together. So thanks to those for listening. I will talk to you guys in the future. Hey, a couple last minute things before you go. Thanks for listening to this show. If you liked it, you can find many more on the website 13thr.wordpress.com, or on your favorite podcasting platform. You can often find behind-the-scenes information about this show and other things that I do on social media, such as Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You'll see links to those in the show notes. Sometimes people will ask me, how can I help contribute to the show or other things that I do? And probably one of the easiest ways is by going over to Facebook and looking up the Facebook group called 13th Hour Arts. And it's a place for not only to discuss these kinds of things, but also for you to share your own creative process and the things that you're doing that bring meaning to your life. You can also do things that are entirely free, such as leaving a review for a book, music, this particular podcast, share it with friends, subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform. Email me, writejoshuablum@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your suggestions and comments. You can also leave a one-time donation over at Ko-fi, and that's ko-fi/13thr. It's basically like a virtual tip jar, kind of like the sort of thing like a piano player might have at a bar or something like that. For a small amount, you can also leave a donation on a monthly basis at Patreon, and that helps bring new things to this particular show and to support future projects. And that's at 13th Hour Arts. It's also a place for patrons to share their own creative process and the things that bring inspiration and meaning to them. I hope by sharing a little bit of the creative process in this particular show, it gets people to cultivate that aspect of their own life and to remember that those things are important, even if you are an adult and you may not have time for it. Hopefully, by paying attention to those aspects of your own life, you can remember your own dreams and aspirations and help create a world and make a world that you want to be in. And at the end of the day, that's sort of what the 13th Hour is about. So thanks as always for listening, and I'll talk to you guys next week. Hello and welcome to the 13th Hour podcast. This is episode number 530, and I'm your host, Joshua Blum. And today is, I don't know if it's going to be the last music episode for a little while. I've been doing them straight for the past several weeks, I think 6 weeks. But I wanted to finish up. I've been working hard on this particular track that I started last week. I wanted to finish it up. So I think it's pretty much done at this point. I've been working on it for the past, 2 hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. But anyway, it's called Ice Giant, and I started working on it a little bit in the last couple of weeks, but I recorded it for posterity on this program that I'm using. I'm learning how to use called Bandlab last week and put it in episode 529, and it's called Ice Giant. And I recorded it as a background sort of soundtrack piece for a episode that I did with my brother for his the game that he co-created called Mappa Mundi, which is a tabletop role-playing game that he and his team had been working on for a while now, and it's now out, and you can buy it. And it's beautiful. It's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, but the rules are not quite as nitpicky. I think what is the word he uses? Crunchy, I guess, as he puts it, often with lots of rules and statistics and stuff like that. It's about storytelling. And if you're a writer and you like to tell stories, I think it's actually a very perfect fit for that. Even probably more so than the original Dungeons and Dragons, which you could still do it for. But because the rules are much more freeform in certain ways, the emphasis is on narrative. And it's not a combat-based game like a lot of role-playing games are. The emphasis is on being a naturalist, basically, an explorer. I don't know if it's fitting or not. Jane Goodall, one of my heroes, recently just passed away, age of 91. So she made quite an impact on the world. When I was in college, I wanted to be a primatologist. The reasons for that are a little bit sus, I will say, because I discovered that chimpanzees could do backflips. So I decided I wanted to study chimpanzees. Probably not the reason that many people go into ecology and conservation work. But that said, that was my reasoning, and I did learn quite a bit about chimpanzees and read a number of Jane Goodall's books that I could get at the time, and other ones by Diane Fossey and so forth. There's many other people. Lois Leakey he was the one that got Jane Goodall to go to Tanzania. He recruited a number of different people over the years. Three women, if I recall right, to study the great apes. Jane Goodall, who studied chimpanzees, and Diane Fossey, who studied gorillas. And then for orangutans, or orang-utans, as my brother liked to say, because the way it's spelled, it's Barute Gallicus. Anyway, this is not the Great Ape Show, but anyway, it's a game that is kind of like being a National Geographic explorer in a way, I guess, which is something that I always thought was cool as a kid, and used to watch like the National Geographic specials and things like that on television, because the emphasis is on studying wildlife and recording it and not necessarily disturbing it. So that said, this is a track made for a time when your character is actually observing this large ice giant who's kind of like half solid, half ghost, I guess you could say. And it's this large presence that is trudging through the snow, leaving little to no trace. And there's animals that actually, wildlife that is actually following it. And it's sort of just a natural phenomenon that you watch, and you don't get involved with it. It's just there. It's kind of like the Northern Lights and things like that. In fact, I think that the Northern Lights would be a perfect sort of background picture to this. But that said, it's just a natural phenomenon that you're observing. And that's sort of the point of the game, is to you go on adventures and document things and see what you can see of the natural world. There's these sort of fantastic creatures that inhabit the world. And in a way, it's kind of like what, I don't know, Lewis and Clark or something like that we're supposed to do. You're supposed to sort of chart an area and see what's there and record it and bring it back to, for other people to learn about, kind of like the old school, I guess very much like National Geographic, like these explorer societies, that existed in the Victorian era. Go out and, they had a very colonialistic kind of mind to it. But if you think about it, it was about discovering things, even though those things they were discovering were not new discoveries necessarily. They were already known to other people. But that said, I guess the ethos of it is on not necessarily disturbing things in its purest sense, even though that's not always what happened. Anyway, without getting into politics or anything like that, let's talk a little bit about this track, which is called The Ice Giant. The Ice Giant is something that I decided to use this program for, and for the past month and a half, I really wanted to learn how to use a DAW, digital audio workspace. At this point, I'm pretty familiar with using this program called Bandlab. When I first started this, it was kind of frustrating, and I didn't have a good sense about which program to use. And now I'm pretty comfortable using this one. And it has some really distinct advantages. It has some really distinct disadvantages too. I'm still not necessarily convinced it's the answer to everything, but I think it's just another tool. I'll put that I'll just put that on the shelf and leave it alone. But what you end up doing is that I do have it hooked up to a keyboard, a small keyboard. This is actually a little keyboard that I got for my kids to play around with, and I'm using it because they're not using it right now, and it has a MIDI input and output, so I can connect it to the computer and use it as a keyboard to actually hit the notes and stuff like that in real time in a more lifelike way. That said, you don't actually need that. You can actually use the actual physical computer keyboard to do it. It's just not as intuitive if you're used to playing the piano. And you can, there are times when I've definitely actually I've worked on this elsewhere where I didn't have the MIDI controller here, and I just used the keyboard. Or in some cases, I was doing it on a laptop where I actually tapped the screen. Which worked okay, but I still actually like the physical button. And that's actually the cool thing about this particular program, Bandlab. I don't know if it exists with other ones, but I can work on it in several different platforms. I can work on it even on my phone. You can work on a laptop, and you can work on it on whatever main computer you use, because it's web-based, and so it's essentially just stored, I don't know, in a cloud somewhere. And when you save it to essentially the internet, wherever your account, you make an account and you save it all your files to that, which is pretty cool. It's also free, which is also pretty cool that exists. So distinct advantage, because you can work on it in so many different places. I couldn't do that before. What I ended up doing is, I talked about this last time, I ended up recording a sort of a main arpeggiated thing here, and I'll just actually play that. Let's see here. That's this one, and it sounded kind of like this. I ended up changing the effects a little bit to make it sound a little bit more ethereal. And this basically just repeats throughout much of the track itself. What I've done in between is I've added other things. So I added this, I may have done this last week, I added a beat to it. I think this is probably where I left off last week. And then I added this part here, which is like a bass. As well as this part. So this is like a synthesized like clapping sound. It's like the drum part, I guess you could say. Because I felt that sounded very 80s. So one thing that aside from that, so that part basically will repeat for the duration of the track. And what I ended up doing to set the stage for this is I ended up getting some sound effects. And I did this actually with the Hunter track before. I wanted to give the sense that, again, it's telling a story through sound. So I wanted to give a sense that the main character, who in the story that Jeremy and I did, the main character is an explorer named Axel. And when he encounters this particular creature, he's trudging through the snow. It's like a frozen tundra type of thing, and he sees this creature and he sort of hides to observe it. And so I wanted to give a sense that he is walking along and he sees it and he stops. So there's this little part right here where it's just a sound effect. I found, there's these free sounds out there that you can get. You can hear that. You may be able to hear that through the speakers. But there's that, and I wanted to give a sense that there's it's kind of windy, snowy, so there's some wind in the background too. anyway, so that's there. So that's playing in the background. And then there is a little bit of an intro as Axel is walking along. I used some of the same keys that the whole arpeggio is based off of, which is this. So it's basically starting in B flat, D, D sharp, F, and then repeating to, or going back down, and then D sharp, D, B, B flat, and then F. So that's the whole thing. And so I'm using basically some of the notes and stuff like that from all these little variations. I made an intro part and I made a bridge part, and there's like a lead that kind of will play, and it's all using basically stuff from essentially those keys. So it all is all, so it's all in tune. So this is like the little intro part that I have just made. So I wanted to make it so that the arpeggio comes in and then he sort of stops as he's observing this creature. And then the track starts to build. So let's see. So that's that part, and that's this is the notes of the intro. And the wonderful thing about this is that you don't actually necessarily need to remember this, because the program actually records where the notes are. So it has a little keyboard on the side. So if I don't remember, I can actually just refer back to this that's actually another advantage of it. So anyway, there's that. And then let's see, I wanted to do a little bit of a bridge. So there's a part where the song actually speeds up a little bit, and it's sort of done in double time. And it kind of sounds a little bit like this. Yeah, so there's that part there, and then there's a bridge part which will come, let's see, where's the bridge? The bridge is right over here, and what I wanted to do for the bridge there is I wanted to do a slightly different pattern, and it sounds sort of like this. Yeah, so then there's a lead part that I did, because when you play it, all that stuff as it builds, it does sound a bit repetitive after a while. So I wanted to give it a little bit of a lead that, or because there's no vocals or anything like that. So I wanted to give it a little bit of something to focus on that wasn't, that would be sort of the play, almost like vocals, the melody, so to speak, the little hook of it. And it's a descending, some descending notes. So it sounds kind of like this all together. So it has this sort of like ethereal kind of sound to it, which is what I was looking for, because it's really, it's sort of it's a snowy landscape. Like I said, like aurora borealis is maybe in the background somewhere. It's like a very majestic creature, and I wanted to give it a sense of awe in the track, not necessarily threatening, So I originally wrote this in the key of C. Then one other cool thing about this is you can transcribe or transpose up or down, kind of like a guitar where you if you don't necessarily know the chords for something, you can use this thing called a capo, which you can put over the strings to make the key higher, essentially. And so you don't necessarily, if you don't know how to play a C sharp, you just put the capo on the first fret, and your C now becomes, a C sharp, because it just went up 1/2 step. So this can kind of do that too, and keyboards can also do that. But that said, I when I did this, I think I did that originally, but then the other ones I was just playing in B flat. So anyway, that's not necessarily relevant for knowledge of this, but my point in saying that is that when I was doing the lead and the intro, outro, and stuff like that, those are all keys in there. When I did it originally in C, it had a very kind of chipper, happy sound, and I wanted to make it a little bit different than the usual thing. It's not unhappy, it's not a minor key, it's but I wanted to give it a little bit of, I'm not really sure what the word is, but a little bit, not melancholy, I don't know what the right word is exactly, but I wanted to sound a little bit different. And so, but not necessarily sad or anything like that. And so that's why I did it in this particular key, which is maybe a little bit unusual. So that's a very roundabout way of saying that I tried to make the song sounds not like emo or anything like that, not like super moody. I wanted to be actually kind of happy, or kind of like, not necessarily neutral, like more positive, like a sense of awe and not optimism, wonder, I guess, from the whole thing. So anyway, I've talked a lot. Let's actually just listen to the track as it stands. I have not heard it all the way through too many times. There's probably some tweaking that will need to be done with the mixing and all that kind of stuff like that. But let's actually just see what it sounds like just as of now. right, so that's it. That's the song, and that is Ice Giant. And I wanted to end it. I ended it basically the way I started it, with similar notes and stuff like that. I think it ends on. There it ends on B flat. So where it basically starts. So that's the song, and I think I'll give it a few more listens and then fiddle with it a little bit more. I have a picture that I'm going to try to animate for this. So next week probably will be the 2 episodes. Either I'll do it all at once or I'll split it up. I'm not sure, depending on the length of it, because we recorded it over 2 sessions. But I have a little animation that I've been working on that I hope to put this to. But you will hear it. It's in the first part. You will hear it in the background as the track or the podcast is going, and Jeremy and I are talking about encountering this creature. You'll hear it in the background, hopefully, if all goes well. And then I'll put it all together with the animation, probably shortly afterwards when that's done. Yeah, it's been fun learning how to use this. It's not as hard as I thought it would be necessarily. And so what I probably will go back to trying some of the other programs that I initially tried that were too difficult. There's one that's called Cakewalk, I think, that maybe I'll understand a little bit better. I think the cool thing about this is it allows you to record stuff very easily. That's, I would say, is a plus. The thing I don't like about it is how fiddly it is. So it's kind of like using Photoshop. It's very tedious. It's very easy to sort of sit in front of a computer, which is actually not my preferred way of making music. Anyway, I think it's a cool thing. If you're a musician or interested in getting into music and you think there's a big barrier to entry, I would say there's some, but I used a number of YouTube tutorials and things like that to learn what I was doing, and then also to answer questions. If you're used to doing something else, then it's not too hard, I think, to get into something like this. Anyway, thanks for being along for the journey. Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you guys in the future. Hey, a couple last minute things before you go. Thanks for listening to this show. If you liked it, you can find many more on the website 13thr.wordpress.com or on your favorite podcasting platform. You can often find behind-the-scenes information about this show and other things that I do on social media such as Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You'll see links to those in the show notes. Sometimes people will ask me, how can I help contribute to the show or other things that I do? And probably one of the easiest ways is by going over to Facebook and looking up the Facebook group called 13th Hour Arts. And it's a place for not only to discuss these kinds of things, but also for you to share your own creative process and the things that you're doing that bring meaning to your life. You can also do things that are entirely free, such as leaving a review for a book, music, this particular podcast, share it with friends, subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform, email me, writejoshuablum@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your suggestions and comments. You can also leave a one-time donation over at Ko-fi, and that's ko-fi/13thr. It's basically like a virtual tip jar, kind of like the sort of thing like a piano player might have at a bar or something like that. For a small amount, you can also leave a donation on a monthly basis at Patreon, and that helps bring new things to this particular show and to support future projects. And that's at 13th Hour Arts. It's also a place for patrons to share their own creative process and the things that bring inspiration and meaning to them. I hope by sharing a little bit of the creative process in this particular show, it gets people to cultivate that aspect of their own life and to remember that those things are important, even if you are an adult and you may not have time for it. Hopefully, by paying attention to those aspects of your own life, you can remember your own dreams and aspirations and help create a world and make a world that you want to be in. And at the end of the day, that's sort of what the 13th Hour is about. So thanks as always for listening, and I'll talk to you guys next week.